Okay, we're going to start making our model for our bridging, which is going to be our next concept that we're talking about. So we're talking about overhangs and bridges. These are all concepts that are going to be very important when we're doing our 3D printing to know where our limits are with our printer. So we've created a new Tinkercad model, and I've called it my first name, and this is going to be bridges because that's what we're talking about with our bridges. What we're going to want to do is orient so that we can see our grid line, our work plane really well. Your snap grid, what you want to do is make sure that your grid is set to be 1 millimeter. So that means that each of these little grid squares is going to be 1 millimeter in length. So when I drag my box in, and we're going to start with dragging a box in here, and I drag this box in, if I set it up on the right spot, it's going to take exactly, I was off by 1 square. So if I move it over 1, I can get it to where it sets up and it is exactly 20 millimeters. So if I have got this, it's taking up 2 full boxes. So that's 20 millimeters. What we're going to do is we're going to resize this box. We want to make it so that it's 10 millimeters tall. We're going to make it 5 millimeters wide and 5 millimeters long. So we're going to make this a 5 by 5. Okay, so that's going to be our block so that we've got our block there. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to need to duplicate this. So I've got my block here. And what we want to do with this block is we're going to make a model that's going to have some bridging. So we're going to have this, drag this over a little bit. And I want to put it right at an edge. So it's going to make it easy for me to know when I'm doing my measurements so I know what I'm doing. So I'm putting it right at the edge because what we're going to do is we need to put a gap in there so we know what our gap is for where we're at. So actually, I'm going to make this at this corner here because what we're going to do is we want to put a 10 millimeter gap between. So I'm going to use this blue line as our gap. So I'm going to duplicate it. So Control D to duplicate my model. Then I'm going to drag my model across and I'm going to make sure that it is right at the front line and I can zoom in if I need to, so that I can get and rotate my model around so I can see where I'm at, right? If I need to do this, and so we have got this. So I've got this. I'm going to scroll in so I can zoom in and see. So this one is not, needs to come forward just a little bit so that it's lined up. This one is lined up. There's a 10 millimeter gap between them. So again, if I want to align these, what I can do is if I use my alignment tool, I can make sure that they're both aligned to the front. Oh, I don't want to do that because that aligned everything to the front. But if I use my alignment tool, I can make sure that they're both lined up to the front so that they're exactly in line with each other. And the gap between them is 10 millimeters. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a work plane on top. And this work plane we're going to add on top. We're going to create a new block. And this block that we're going to put in is going to be 5 millimeters tall. So we're going to make it 5 millimeters tall. It's going to be 5 millimeters wide because it's going to sit right on top of this. But we actually need our length to be so that it goes the full length. So what we're actually going to do is go the 20 millimeters. So that's going to make it so that it covers our model here. So we're going to put it right on top. And by using our work plane, everything is going to line up exactly where we need it to be. Okay, so that's going to be what our model is. So this is our first bridge. Okay, so we've got a 10 millimeter gap in between our bridge, and that's going to be what we're trying to come up with. This one now, what we're going to do is we're going to make this so that this gets to be, this is going to be taller. So we want this to do its 10 millimeters, and we've got the 5 millimeters. We're actually going to make this a 20 millimeter gap. So we're going to add this. So that's going to add, what we've done here is its original was 10. We added 5 by putting this block on top. Then we're bringing this all the way up through the middle to put another 5 to put our next bridge onto it. So that's going to make our bridge so that we can get our next bridge set over. So now what we're going to do is take our work plane and we're going to just go back off of our work plane here. So we go back to our model. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this model that I've got here. So I'm going to do Control D to duplicate it. And now I'm going to drag this so that I've got 30 millimeters. So I'm going to keep dragging it and I can see here. So I'm going to make this a 30 millimeter gap. 28, 29, 30 millimeter gap. So now I've got a 30 millimeter gap. So now what I want to do is I am going to align these together again, make sure that my alignment is set up so that they're all pulled up to the front, so that they're in line. I'm going to do my work plane on top, and we are going to add another box. This box now we got the 30 millimeter gap. So remember, we got 30 in between, 5 on either side. So that's going to make it a 40. So we're going to make this box 5 millimeters tall. We're going to make this box 40 millimeters long. And we're going to make this box 5 millimeters wide. So now what I'm going to do is orient my image to where I can see what's going on here. And I'm going to move this so that it is right on top. Actually, it should have been 35 millimeters. So I got 5, 30. Yep. So I made this too long. What did I do here? So I got to make this 35. There it is. So that's my 35. So I got my 30. So I got my 5 millimeters in between. So I got the 30 millimeters in between. So this is going to be 35 for my block. So my block is now the right height. I'm going to go back to this one. So this again, remember the height on this one. If we looked at the height of this one, the height was, we want to get this. See, I'm off just a little bit. So I want to pull this back just a hair so that it's lined up perfectly. So that's why I'm looking at my model from all angles so that I can make sure that my model is lined up. Everything is looking the way that it should. I'm going to take my work plane back off. So I go back to my model. I click on this shape. Remember, it's the 20. I've got the 5. I'm going to add 5 more. So I'm going to change the height of this to 30 now. So this one's going to be 30. Gives me that extra 5 millimeter gap. Now we're going to duplicate this. Control D. I'm going to drag this one out, dragging it straight across. This one I'm going to give it an 80 millimeter gap. So we're going to make this to be an 80 millimeter gap. There's my 80 millimeter gap. I check my line. My line is the right distance, right everything. If I want to, I can zoom out just a little bit. Get this highlight here, use my alignment tool, make sure that I bring them all to the front so that they're all perfectly aligned, because this is going to be a nice straight model. And now I'm going to do my work plane on top. Oh, no, I don't want to do the box. I'm going to get rid of that. That's not what I wanted to do. I meant to do my work plane on top, and I am going to add my box in again, and my box is going to be 5 millimeters tall. My box is going to be 5 millimeters wide, and the length of it, so my gap is 80 plus the 5 for this, because I'm going to put it on top here, so it's going to be 85. So I'm going to make my width 85. And then I am going to line this up so that it is directly on top of my model. And I'm going to rotate around. Oh, see, you can see I'm not directly on top of my model. I'm going to move this over so, well, I don't want to do that. I'm going to drag so I can move. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm changing the width of the model. Let me zoom in a little bit here. I want to grab the model itself and move it. And I got to rotate it here. It's just a little bit off. I'm going to drag my model over just a little bit. And I'm going to check it to make sure that it is oriented properly. So look at that. It's all straight. It's tight. It is there. I'm going to take this off. This is my bridge model. So you have just created a model to demonstrate your understanding of bridges. Right here was what you guys need to know. 10 millimeters is really the gap. Anything about 10 millimeters is going to print perfectly. What we're going to see when you guys print this model is you're going to see some drooping or some overlapping or some things that are going to start to droop in here. And that's going to be because the distance between the bridge gets greater. So when we don't have support materials and we get this 80 millimeter bridge, you're going to see some warping and some distortion. So this is not a good bridge length. This is not a good bridge length without support materials, just doing it. Now, this 10 millimeters is usually kind of an okay bridge. what it comes down to is we want to make sure that the bridges are, the less support material we have to use, the better, because we don't have to scrape things off and sand things and get things done. So that is your bridge model. You're going to turn your bridge model in for 3D printing. We are not going to print this one. I'll have a demonstration one to show you guys what the bridge model looks like.